Hi, everybody. I'm Mohamed Moti from the Sorbonne University and Saint Antoine Hospital in Paris, in France. And it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to this new activity by the IACH. In a letter to Robert Hooke in 1675, Isaac Newton made his most famous statement: if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Standing on the shoulders of the giants initiative by the International Academy for Clinical Hematology aims to celebrate the achievement of leading experts and investigators whose work and research have helped to significantly advance the field of clinical hematology and establish the milestones and foundations of modern clinical hematology. Our honoree today is Dr. Giampaolo Merlini from Italy, who you all know very well. Dr. Merlini dedicated his career to the field of amyloidosis, and his contributions, his research, his work allowed to modify the natural history of this terrible disease. And today, thanks to the work, efforts, energy of Dr. Merlini, a significant proportion of these patients are cured or can live in complete remissions for several decades. Before starting the interview with Dr. Merlini, I'd like to share with you a few videos.
Dr. Merlini has a lifelong track record of bench-to-bedside research in amyloidosis. His fundamental studies have delineated the mechanisms giving rise to amyloidosis, the importance of early diagnosis, the clinical utility of cardiac biomarkers at diagnosis for risk stratification. He's helped define the response criterion in amyloidosis, and most importantly, developed strategies for clinical trials leading to the first FDA-approved treatments of this disease. He has a long history of treating patients even before the development of effective therapies, and always demonstrates a quiet, heartfelt concern for his patients, treating them as family. He's also served as a mentor and role model for the next generation of researchers and caregivers. When I was privileged to be president of ASH, my highest honor was to invite him to give the Ham Wasserman Lecture in 2017, where he outlined for an international audience his seminal studies that have led to such progress in the treatment and our understanding of amyloidosis. So, Giampaolo is a cherished friend and a giant in our field. He already has and is continuing to transform our understanding, first of the pathogenesis of amyloidosis, then in the clinic informing the diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. Most importantly, he has transformed the treatment paradigm and improved the outcome of patients and their families worldwide. And there's no greater legacy than this. We are so grateful for all his efforts and his example of taking care of one another.
It's an honor to me to celebrate the achievements of Dr. Giampaolo Merlini, a giant in the field of amyloidosis. His work and research has helped to significantly advance the field of amyloidosis and to establish the milestone and foundation of modern clinical hematology. Based on his work, we have learned that amyloid-forming free light chains are directly toxic to the heart muscle and about the signaling pathways that are involved in damaging the tissue. He helped us to determine markers for organ response, which was a breakthrough in understanding and measuring organ response. And on a personal level, I'm very grateful for the tremendous support I received from Dr. Merlini when I started to test 11-104, an anti-amyloid antibody, in an investigator-initiated first-in-human clinical trial. Another trial using a similar anti-amyloid monoclonal antibody conducted by Procina had just failed, and subsequently there was limited enthusiasm for 11-104 and for my trial. So Dr. Merlini's constant encouragement to move on with the study and to believe in the concept, to continue even in the most difficult time, helped me so much to successfully complete the trial. I think without his outstanding scientific but also personal encouragement, I would have most likely given up. So if 11-104 or KIL-101 will ever be approved as an anti-amyloid strategy, it will be also due to Dr. Merlini. Dr. Merlini is a giant who devoted his life to amyloidosis and to support the next generation. This together, I think, with a very humble personality, coupled with an unbelievable knowledge in amyloidosis, and moreover, a big smile, makes him a very unique giant in amyloidosis. And all what I can say is thank you, Giampaolo, for all what you have done for us and especially for our patients. Thank you.
I am very happy and I'm honored for this opportunity to say a few words for Professor Merlini. Professor Merlini is a giant of medicine. His research has been pivotal in the advances in the field of amyloidosis. His lectures have been an invaluable resource for all of us. His papers have been the guides that we use in our everyday practice to treat our patients with amyloidosis. I cannot measure his accomplishments, these are so many, but there is more. Professor Merlini is a very kind person, and I'm feeling in debt for his kind words all these years and his sincere help and care. Professor Merlini, you are a true friend and a teacher to me, and I can only thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you have offered to me and to all of us.
I have been working with Professor Merlini for almost 30 years now. And when I first met him, I was a 21-year-old medical student, eager to start working in the clinic and hoping to find a mentor. And a true mentor I found. From the very first days with him in the Department of Internal Medicine, I learned the importance of observing patients and of listening to them, and then to ask myself questions to understand the causes behind what I saw and possibly to find solutions to the patient's problems. Professor Merlini always says that patients are a source of inspiration for him. And that is true. But I can add that serving patients is the true goal of all his professional life. All the many accomplishments of his career sprang from observation of patients, and I could mention establishing new tools for diagnosis, amyloid diseases, understanding their mechanisms, establishing better tools for treating and monitoring patients, but also finding the time to found and I would say build the Amyloid Center in Pavia, and thinking of it in every single detail as a place where patients could feel welcome, and also establishing the patient network in Italy so that they could find good quality care near to the place of residence. Well, all of this was always done to serve patients and to relieve their distress. Spending time in the clinics with him, I came to really appreciate how truly he is sympathetic with patients' suffering. I would say that Professor Merlini is almost unsettled by our incomplete understanding of this suffering. And now that I can spend some more good quality time talking with him, I am probably having my most fruitful conversations with him. And every day I realize how truly he is a mentor and an example in science and in life.
Dr. Merlini,
Yes.
welcome and thank you for joining us today to this special broadcast of the Standing on the Shoulders of the Giant. I'll be very straightforward, and I will start with my first question to you. If you can tell us something about your early childhood, early education experience, and how that might have played a role in your selection of scientific and medical fields.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moti, for this honor and your most generous word of introduction. To answer your question, I grew up in a small country village near Cremona, the town of Stradivari and Monteverdi, in the north of Italy. In my early childhood, I was influenced by an old uncle, Uncle Giulio, who introduced me to the wonders of nature on long walks the countryside and instilling me the curiosity to understand natural phenomena. In high school, I became really fascinated by chemistry and the possibility of understanding natural phenomena at the fundamental molecular level. So when I have to choose the university, I was very undecided between chemistry and medicine. And an old professor of chemistry of mine was decisive in addressing me to medicine, recommending to focus on biochemistry. So he told me this way you could have chemistry, but also the biological aspect of chemistry. I would say that biochemistry was the basis for my work in medicine. And I would also like to add that the possibility when many years later to study biochemistry of proteins during my stage at Professor Jan Waldenström lab in Sweden was the key to all my subsequent research.
This is fantastic, actually. So it looks like that there were several teachers and faculty that you thought they were exemplary and have influenced your career. Am I correct in my interpretation?
Well, yes, Dr. Moti, you are right. Regarding the academic tradition, my academic mentor in the faculty of medicine in Pavia was Professor Sergio Perugini, who was part of the great Italian hematology school founded by Adolfo Ferrata. That was really the founder of Italian hepatology. Professor Perugini showed me the importance of traditional research, the advantage of starting on the shoulder of a master, and the obligation at the same time to pass on to future generations a field with a deeper knowledge of the disease and better care thanks to translational research. After my graduation, my main two mentors were Jan Waldenström in Sweden and Elliot Osserman at Columbia University.
Well, that brings me to an important question, as you may guess.
Yes.
And this is about what particularly about amyloidosis that attracted you to move to this field. I mean, you have dedicated several decades and you were totally focused. You built an institute, a worldwide famous place in Pavia dedicated to this very rare entity.
Right. Well, very important question. Actually, I must confess that I was somehow forced to enter the amyloidosis field. I was initiated to the very mysterious condition of amyloidosis by my two mentors, Jan Waldenström and Elliot Osserman. Waldenström was convinced that big science was in the stage. And after the stage with him, by the way, I decided to stay with Waldenström because I read his book, Monoclonal and Polyclonal Gammopathies. And that book is fascinating because it's full of case presentations with many questions. So after staying with Waldenström, he addressed me to Elliot Osserman at Columbia University in New York. Osserman was a world-leading expert in plasma cell dyscrasia. He had worked before on amyloidosis, and he was the president of the fourth symposium on amyloidosis in 1984. So more or less he conscripted me despite my reluctance, because it was reluctant because the field was so foggy. I mean, there was nothing clear into the realm of systemic amyloidosis. And so we reached a deal that I will work for 1 year, and if nothing interesting will come up, I will then return to my beloved myeloma proteins. However, during this study, as I reported when at the meeting at the symposium, I found that light chain fragments were the main constituent of amyloid fibrils, highlighting the importance of catalytic remodeling in amyloid formation. So that gave me the idea that amyloid, in amyloid biochemistry, played a key role. And that ignited my interest for this disease. So this observation was really the trigger to my interest. At the same conference, George Glenner reported the discovery of the beta protein forming cerebrovascular amyloid in Alzheimer's disease. So I thought that this field was really an extremely interesting field from the biologic point of view. And together with Glenner, we had a lot of discussion. And he predicted that the unfailing of the molecular mechanism for different amyloidosis will trigger the development of targeted therapies. I was fascinated by this concept. And we are now finally approaching this goal.
Well, I agree with you, really fascinating. I looked recently to your PubMed publications, and I found almost 600 papers that you authored or co-authored dedicated to amyloidosis. The total number of citations is almost 40,000, H index 92. But can you please tell me what was the status of the research on amyloidosis in the early 80s when you started? Because for me, when I was a medical student, that was considered a desperate situation.
Exactly.
Nothing worked.
Exactly. Indeed, total amyloidosis was the dark tunnel of knowledge with foggy pathogenesis, poor recognition because it was not recognized. I mean, I knew hematologists could deny to have seen any amyloid patients at the end of their career, and a lack of therapy. As you said, the diagnosis was a curse with a median survival of 6 to 8 months. Very little was known about the molecular mechanism of the disease. That was at that time grossly divided between primary and secondary amyloidosis. Furthermore, at that time, you must to think about this. Small randomized trials failed to show the advantage of chemotherapy with methylprednisolone over colchicine. So it was just a dessert, and it was, in fact, considered as a clear demonstration in a randomized trial of the superiority of methylprednisolone over colchicine was published by the Mayo Clinic in 1997. So the field was clearly devastated and nothing worked because we didn't know the disease. There was a confusion of the cause of the disease. Then furthermore, there was no patient stratification. The diagnosis was made very late and practically nothing worked. So I understood that that was the cause of the problem, but the problem was possibly tackling. So it was possible to address the basic problem, but it was just due to a poor handling of the condition that made it completely hopeless. So that further motivated me to work in the field.
This is, again, a very, very amazing and very impressive. So you started in this field where nothing worked. And in addition to your remarkable training in Italy and very prestigious institutions, you also went abroad, Sweden, but also you spent a lot of time at Columbia University. But despite, being in these very prestigious institutions, you prefer to go back to your home city, to Pavia. And I wonder, what was the situation of research, whether basic or clinical research, on amyloidosis at the University of Pavia when you returned from Columbia University in 1985?
Right. Well, Dr. Martin, I will explain later on why I decided to return to Pavia. But when I returned to Pavia, there was a desert with no basic research or clinical research on amyloidosis ongoing. The disease was really rarely spotted and left untreated. So one of the first initiatives that I took was to build from scratch a laboratory dedicated to protein biochemistry. So first, research. Second, improve the awareness about the disease. And for this reason, I established the first ever in the world national network of centers in order to increase the awareness of the disease and gather patients for clinical trials. Because the other problem is to reach a critical number of patients to run meaningful trials. And it was clear to me that in order to improve the care of a rare disease, you need a network. Network was vital. This was a very lengthy and stressful process, but formed the basis of the present referral amyloid research center in Pavia. So people ask me why at the hospital. I ask the hospital manager to give me space for the lab. And he asked me, why do you want to have a lab? And I reply, well, if I don't do research, I will betray my patients. That means we need to understand better the disease in order to progress.
So you have built everything from scratch in
Yeah.
an environment where this rare disease didn't or almost didn't exist, I would say,
Yes.
totally neglected like many other orphan rare diseases. But I guess, and you mentioned the network, and I wonder whether there are people who were active in research at that time that you would like to comment on and who may have influenced you
Yeah.
and maybe contributed to creating this positive environment about amyloidosis, I would say.
Well, certainly, Jan Waldenström played a central role because he introduced me the concept of sick molecules and disease. So, and he ignited my interest in the investigation of the pathologic effect of monoclonal proteins. The first lesson. The second was I learned from it the importance of the very careful patient examination, of searching the molecular basis of the clinical manifestations. As you know, most of the discovery of Jan Waldenström came from the observation of a patient. And that I will come back on this point, but that was critical to me. In New York, I had the great fortune to work closely with Felvin Kabat, that was the world leading expert in immunochemistry, the pupil of Michael Heidelberger, that is often regarded as the father of modern immunology. I learned from him the rigorous experimental approach and the importance to discuss openly the data with colleagues. Elliot Osama told me the importance of translating to the clinic the advances made in the laboratories. But very important was also the opportunity to discuss, to meet colleagues involved in basic research and in clinical research in different institutions, in the States, particularly in Mayo Clinic Group and the Boston University Group. In Europe, with the latter group, led by Professor Pepys, the Porto group with Maria Saraiva, the Uppsala group with Per Westerberg, and that within my university hospital, Policlinico San Matteo in Pavia. I believe that I'm deeply indebted to all these colleagues for exchanging ideas and getting new route for research and therapy. So indeed, you are right. I believe that the masters were important, but colleagues also played an important role in modeling my way of thinking and developing new research avenues. As I told you, I believe strongly that, particularly for rare disease, getting together, networking is vital. And that was very important for me as well.
Well, I think, I mean, we knew this, but now when I hear it again, you had this remarkable energy to bring people together, and you mentioned building this very strong network around a rare orphan disease.
Exactly.
And you mentioned your masters, but you became very quickly a master, and you managed to train dozens of amyloidosis doctors who are today practicing and helping patients everywhere. And I wonder, how did you manage to attract these young physicians to be interested in such a rare and difficult disease?
Very good question. Indeed. Well, I believe that enthusiasm is a big driver. When people see you so enthusiastic and motivated, they get moved and become curious about what you're doing, of course. And I always dedicated a lot of attention to the training of young doctors and to the build-up of a strong local research group while helping the birth of many amyloidosis centers worldwide. Many doctors working in centers in Europe, Canada, Argentina, Uruguay, Japan were trained in Pavia. And I was one of the founders of the International Society of Amyloidosis. I think that is the vital importance of local and international collaboration and of young doctors for improving the care of this now curable disease. At the beginning of my activity in Pavia, as you rightly pointed out, I recruited young people. At the time, I was collaborating with a biochemist led by Vittorio Bellotti, but then gradually I selected motivated clinical and basic researcher, and together we built the amyloid research and treatment center that really represent bio-based inheritance. So pupils have become important collaborators who have contributed to the growth of the center and to the treatment of the amyloidosis, not only Pavia but international level. I cannot name all of them, of course, but the senior researchers such as Giovanni Palladini, who now direct the centers, so is succeeding me, and Laura Obici played a fundamental role. So for me, it was a joy to see that these pupils grow and they grew up, they became famous internationally, and that now they can continue the work that I started. And I believe that this is one of, I consider this to be one of the main achievements. I think these motivated people continue the good work.
Well, this is again absolutely fabulous, where you have such a legacy, and I think in every amyloidosis center across the globe, we speak about the contributions of Dr. Merlini. We spoke about the way you have built the lab, the way you have built the team, your training, your interest. And I think you mentioned a few minutes ago that you were very loyal to the teaching of your master, Jan Waldenstrom, about focusing on the patient. So I would like to come back to this relationship with the patient, because you are among the very few doctors and colleagues I know where we can write to you anytime during the day or night, and I've done it personally several times, you remember, and you would always very kindly answer and give your opinion and try to help. So what is this very unique relationship you have with your patient? How do you do it?
Yeah, Dr. Mott, is so good to have this conversation with you, because you touch just my deep interest, and I keep saying to all my pupils that we do everything for patients. So patients are really central, and never forget the core business. The core business is the patient. When you forget this, you get lost. So the patients have been really, for me, an essential source of inspiration. throughout all my career, even when I was very well established and so on. I never skipped the outpatient clinic. And I made sure that I can see all the patients. They were there to see, but that was mostly because in my own interest, because I was learning constantly from patients. And this is probably the most important heritage I had from Jan Waldenström, as you said. In my case, for instance, I remember in the early days, the observation of the rapid improvement of the clinical conditions that I observed after only 2 months of successful chemotherapy in a patient that was incompatible with the amyloid reabsorption that requires several months. And this kept repeating, and that, of course, opened in my mind a new way of thinking that the amyloid light chain was directly toxic to certain organs. This was corroborated by the finding of the concomitant reduction to the concentration of the amyloid light chains and of the cardiac biomarker NT-proBNP that we discovered in Pavia. So in this case, it was just a case of reverse translational research from clinic to the lab. So this finding had an important implication both for basic research, but also in the care of the patients with amyloidosis, because now we all recognize that it is critical to achieve a rapid and deep reduction of the light chains in order to improve the cardiac function and extend survival. So patients have always been my main teachers.
And thousands and thousands of patients across the globe are really very grateful to you. So let me move now to a more personal question, Dr. Merlini. And I met a few years ago, a couple of times, your lovely wife. I don't know the rest of your family, but maybe you can say a few words about the contribution of your wife and your family during this exciting career. I mean, what was their attitude, behavior? Because you dedicated almost all your time, 7 days a week, to amyloidosis. So what was the opinion of your family?
Well, Dr. Matti, is unbelievable. Your introspection it is. Well, I will say that I would not have done anything without my wife and my family. My wife is a splendid person that dedicated her life to me and to the family. And even nowadays, before these difficulties, I mean, she's always here supporting my work, but also my 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters, Arianna and Alessandra. They are both doctors. Arianna is a neuroscientist. She's doing research in Göttingen. And Alessandra is an oncologist, and following the steps of her father, she decided to devote her interest to an impossible disease, that are sarcomas. So even tougher than amyloidosis. And I would say that all of them were really essential in supporting me. I remember my small taught Alessandra when she was 2. And my wife asked, "Where is the dad?" And she automatically responded, "She's in the laboratory." So that, that's where the dad was always. I tried to spend some good quality time with them, of course. But my wife was really the center of the family. Uh, She just took care of the family while I was working. So I could not have done what I did without her. And another important person is my sister Nelda, who always supported me through these years. And even nowadays, she is very much dedicated to myself. So as you said, family has played a key role in my activity, in my research. I mean, as you said, I have really long hours in the hospital. Most of the time I came back at 9 o'clock after leaving before 8. And Sunday, the only free time I had with the family was Sunday morning, but Wednesday afternoon was to revise the patient records, always. And indeed, but it was good that I understood this. And when I asked my first daughter, who decided to become a doctor, more or less against my will, because I prefer to have a lighter life, you see. Our life as a doctor is rather heavy. And I asked her, "Why do you think about this?" And she replied that, "Well, I see that you are so happy and enthusiastic about your work, but I would like to be like that also." So it's a kind of, I believe that it was a really wonderful support for me. And it is a wonderful support for the family, particularly nowadays. So thank you for this question, but to
So,
catch really the core business of it. Without their support, I would have done nothing. I did.
so if you allow me to summarize it in a few words, it looks like to me that passion, dedication, commitment, but also the sense of sacrifice is in the genes and DNA of the Merlini family. This is amazing.
It is too generous. It is very generous of you. I mean that I think that is very common actually. Seeing you and other colleagues, I think that is a common feeling in medicine. So after all, I feel privileged that I'm doing a work that is helpful for other people. And I think that is a common feeling for all of us.
So you are a giant, you are a master. For my last question, Dr. Merlini, I would like to ask you one favor. What are your hopes for the future of hematology? But most importantly, what is your advice to the younger generation today who is involved in this field?
Well, to talk about the disease, it is a very difficult question, and I don't know if I will be able to answer properly, but I believe that for the hematology field, the advent of precision medicine, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and development of new targeted, more effective and less toxic therapy are really revolutionizing hematology. And I believe that now there is a concrete hope for a cure for many hematology malignant, malignant disease. Your work in myeloma, and you wrote that splendid paper on operational cure in blood about myeloma, just testify that cure is a reachable goal now. Thanks to all these. I would like to make a small note that there's availability of several extensive medicine poses the vital question of affordability and accessibility. I'm very much involved in this. And I believe as a doctor, we should play an active role in this complex, multifaceted, but critical process. So I believe that we should be really involved in making sure that as many as patients as possible could really access this wonderful possibility that now we can offer to the new generations. Well, the simplest thing I can say is that there's never been a better time to become a hepatologist. And now, even more than ever before, it is critical to be a medical scientist with knowledge of both basic and clinical research. I strongly believe that all doctors in the future will be involved in research, because that is really the way to give back to our patients their trust and hope. So creating this new class of medical scientists, I believe, is our responsibility. But this is going really to change the perspective of our patients and the possibility to cure some disease that just few years ago were considered simply fatal is the most great achievement that we can hope for.
Well, Dr. Merlini, after hearing all this in this interview, the only word that comes to my mind is a big thank you in big capital letters. We owe you a lot. Your energy and passion are incredible, unbelievable. Despite your medical condition, you managed and you kindly accepted to give this interview, which I believe a unique moment for me, but for all our colleagues who are listening to us and watching this interview. On behalf of the medical community, on behalf of the families of patients, on behalf even, I would say, of future generations, I would like to convey our gratitude and to tell you how privileged we are to have a giant like yourself in our field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Morty, and thank you to the magnificent scientific community that is just accepting me and my work. It has been really a privilege to be part of this incredible adventure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm deeply grateful to you and to your colleagues. Thank you.
Please take care
Take
and
care
keep
too.
well.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye. Thank you.